Welcome to our Friday video. So first of all, I got a sticker. Do you guys see that? I voted. Early voting. It's going on right now. I encourage people to exercise their democratic voice. It's an important part of what supports our system that environmental economics is operating within. So participate, vote, let your voice be heard. Now, today's video, I want to talk about a topic that I care quite a bit about, and I hope you care a little bit by the end too. So I want to talk a little bit about why costs are quantified and put forward a lot more often than we see benefits quantified and put forward. And this is, of course, in the environmental context. So what we're talking about here is there's some proposal to regulate something. Very often, almost always, we see cost estimates come out, and those get a lot of press and people talk about them a lot. They say, well, this would cost $50 million and we would lose a lot of jobs. Quite often we hear a lot less about quantifying the benefits of what that policy would do, the reductions in pollution, for example. And so I'm going to talk about 4 reasons why that is. And I'll go on a little tangent at the end as part of the 4th one, but we'll keep the video to a reasonable length. So the first reason why costs are estimated and quantified more often than benefits is because it's easier. So as we'll talk about next week, coming up with the cost of complying with some kind of regulation that prevents pollution, it's based on the experience of these companies and the regulators doing this sort of thing all the time, because it's a big part of what they do. So when you're estimating what your cost will look like, you basically look at what it has cost you or similar parties in the past to comply with similar sort of regulatory moves. And so obviously a new policy, it's not going to be exactly like what happened in the past, but there's usually some good stuff to look at. You have estimates from engineers about how much additional equipment will cost, or process people will tell you how much you'll have to change your production, and how you can estimate how much more expensive new cleaner inputs might be, for example. So estimating cost is relatively straightforward. It's within the wheelhouse of the industries that are being regulated, and so it's easier than estimating benefits, which, as we've talked about, we're usually trying to put numbers on the benefits of saving lives, of keeping people healthy, of keeping the environment in a condition that people enjoy, and all of those are things that are really hard to put numbers on. We don't see businesses buying and selling these things. So we have to get kind of creative, and that's what we've talked about this week, is using stated and revealed preference methods to be able to try to estimate the value of saving lives and keeping people healthy and having nice environmental amenities. But we have to get creative. It's not something people are just used to doing as part of their everyday life, as part of their jobs. And so in that sense, quantifying benefits is harder than quantifying cost. So that's number 1. Number 2, so I mentioned it's in the wheelhouse of companies that are regulated to have some good idea about what costs will look like. Those regulated industries have a strong incentive to talk a lot about what their costs will look like. Why will they do that? Well, if you talk a lot about what the cost will be of complying with the new regulation and the jobs that may get lost as part of that and things, it makes it less likely that you're going to be regulated in a stringent way, right? So there's this political economy element of, well, if you don't want to be regulated, you can talk a lot about the cost. And we talked about how pushing up that marginal cost curve one way or another, either in reality or in the way people are thinking about it, or the amount of press it's getting, the way people are trying to measure it, pushing up that marginal cost curve leads to an optimal level of pollution that is higher, which means you're being regulated less. And so companies that have this inside information about their own processes and what things will cost, they have an incentive to get information out there, and as we'll talk about next week, they may even have an incentive to reveal information that is biased, and particularly biased upward. That say it might cost you 20 million to 50 million to comply with a new regulation. If you're the company, you're probably going to say this is going to cost us 50 million, right? It's a range, it's a reasonable estimate. You're going to take something at the upper end of that range because you don't want to be regulated and you want this to have pushback. So there's our second reason that costs are talked about a lot more, they're quantified more, because companies have an incentive to make this a visible topic, to get this information out there. The third reason that costs are quantified more than benefits is because those companies that have private information about how the production process works, they don't have an incentive to quantify benefits most of the time, which is a little bit strange. You could think about a company that reduces its pollution level. It might want to brag about that, right? It might want to, have a media blitz that says, hey, we've created $100 million in benefits by reducing air pollution. We don't see those very often, very rarely from companies themselves. Why not? Well, one reason is because if you're touting a reduction in pollution and how many millions of dollars that has saved us in damages or how many lives have been saved, then you are basically admitting that before you made that change, you were responsible for behavior that was associated with those kind of damages, with those kind of lives lost. Those are things that companies never want to admit to, basically, because you're putting yourself in legal limbo if you do that. If someone is thinking about a lawsuit because they got cancer and they're not sure exactly what caused it, but they think maybe air pollution from a nearby factory was doing it, the company then comes out and says, we just changed our production process to pollute less, and we are now going to save an estimated half a life per year by reducing our air pollution. You're like, whoa, hey, that means I've been breathing this air before you made this change, and yeah, I'm going to sue you because you just said that you estimate, your own estimate is that you're saving lives now, which means you weren't before. I pardon my dog, Teddy. He see a visitor. I'll give us a little pause. We'll come back for the fourth reason. So we just talked about why companies don't want to talk about benefits. I'll give us our fourth reason in another short video.